We interrupt our program to bring you
essential services. Okay, hello. Thank you so much again for taking the time to sit with me. This is a new series on Freckle TV, Essential Services, and with reaching out to you with the Women's Community Shelter, I think this self-isolation period for a lot of people has been a time of to go inward and to think about things. But I think as well it's could be very dangerous for a lot of women that are, in vulnerable situations and don't know what to do and don't know who to turn to and are now stuck. So then when I started to think about that was completely sort of like horrifying and shocking. So yeah, I guess I just want to talk to you about the situation, what's happening, what's being done, and what we can do to sort of assist and help. So upon hearing the initial self-isolation restrictions, what were your thoughts? What came to mind? What was your thought process?
Well, what comes to mind, I think, like I've been working directly in domestic and family violence for a little bit over a decade, but in women's and children's issues for a lot longer than that. And certainly what comes to my mind as someone who's set up shelters in partnerships with communities is that, the isolation or any kind of disaster or pandemic or whatever enhances the risk for women who are living in domestic and family violence situations. And that is partly because what sits behind what we think of as domestic and family violence, which many people still imagine is just physical violence or, maybe it's psychological abuse or a bit of financial. But what sits behind all of those things is a pattern of behaviour that's called coercive control. And essentially what drives all domestic and family violence is the need to control, the need for power over somebody else and to control their behaviour. And so when you're in a pandemic situation where in an intimate partner relationship you're around somebody, almost 24/7, what that does is it means that the opportunity for controlling and observing and monitoring somebody's behaviour is amped up. And so, that might be around things like, and certainly what we've already seen women reporting to us across our network is things like demanding that somebody go out repeatedly to get particular food or grocery items. It could be about threatening to bring people into the house to infect a woman and her kids with COVID. It could be alternatively about mandating really strict cleaning regimes, which are absolutely impossible to keep up with. But it's even around some of the more common elements of that control that domestic violence is about, which is, around things like monitoring someone's behaviour, who they're having contact with, who they're speaking with, what sites they're looking up on the internet, who they're talking on the phone to. And all of those things can make it incredibly difficult for somebody who's living in a domestic violence relationship to be able to reach out for help because the opportunity just isn't there.
Yeah, and I can imagine with those types of behaviours that you mentioned, some women may not even realise that they're being coerced in or controlled. I was before this conversation, I did some research and I saw that I think 1 in 4 young people don't see controlling behavior as a form of abuse, which I found really interesting, and like I can see how that would happen as well.
And it's often around too the family that you grow up in, and the things that you normalise. Everybody I think assumes that the template that they have when they're kids, about a relationship is the way that things are or the way that they're supposed to be.
Yeah.
And so we often find too that recognising that a relationship is abusive or controlling is one of the, recognising that in the first place is one of the biggest barriers to getting help.
Yeah.
It can often take, some kind of external stimulus or a light bulb to go on, or reading something, or, public interest messaging that makes someone realise for the first time, oh, okay, what's going on in my relationship is not okay. And sometimes I think we need to break that down to a really simple messaging. It's like, well, do you feel emotionally safe at home? Do you feel like you have to walk on eggshells around your partner? Do you feel like everything is always your fault? Do you feel like you're going crazy and your memory isn't right? those kinds of things are the really basic questions that people need to be asking themselves. It's a bit of a health check on their relationship.
Wow. Have you experienced an increase or spike since the self-isolating restrictions?
It's been a little bit up and down.
Right.
During the first week after restrictions, we had a lot of phone calls that I would call the preparatory calls, which is where we had people ringing up. And again, often young women who are living back with families where they might have been living separately, or, women who are currently with partners ringing up and saying, look, I'm really worried that if this goes on for a while, things are going to get worse. Will there be support for me if I do need to leave? So it's actually that question that's a step before needing an actual shelter or a safe place to go. It's kind of those preparatory calls, and we've had quite a number of those.
And what do you say when you do receive these calls? Like what available?
What we say is that we're an essential service and we're open and we can continue to support you. Domestic and family violence services, certainly in New South Wales and for the most part across Australia, have been designated as essential services. So we are still open and operating.
Okay.
We've changed a little bit of the way that we do some of our service delivery. Obviously, we're socially distancing when we're talking to people and we're doing phone call and FaceTime check-ins, but we are 100% here and available for people who need us.
That's good. That's really good to know. What would you say the scope of the issue of homelessness amongst women and children is in Australia?
It's huge. 75% of women's homelessness is caused by domestic and family violence. It's a gendered issue.
Yeah.
And so on any given night, there are more than 56,000 women who are homeless across Australia. And those are just the ones that we know about, because many women, those are taken from census figures, and many women don't actually report themselves as homeless on the census because they'll put themselves down, say, as couch surfing or staying with friends or whatever. There is a certain stigma about describing yourself as homeless for a lot of women.
Yeah, definitely.
And so 56,000 every night, which is a staggering number. And for the very first time in the last census, the number of women who are homeless actually exceeded the number of men.
Oh my God. Right. So for any women experiencing domestic violence right now, or people who may know of somebody and are worried for them, what advice can you share? What can they do, and what are their options?
Oh, look, and I think that's a really fabulous question, because this is a problem that is a whole of society problem, and it needs a whole of society solution. We can't just rely on the government to come up with some spectacular idea to get to people who might be experiencing this right now. This is on all of us as neighbours, as friends, as family members, as community members. If there's anybody that you're worried about or that you've had conversations with previously, reach out and check in on them in any way that you can. Keep those connections going. It can just be a friendly ear, and your reach out doesn't always have to be perfect. I think a lot of people are really worried about, oh my gosh, what do I say?
Yeah.
And certainly what women's community shelters have done is on our website, www.womenscommunityshelters.org.au, is we've actually put up a few key questions or conversation starters that people can actually use to initiate that conversation. And I would also say too that in terms of, if you hear a really loud argument and it scares you amongst your neighbours, it is far better to call the police and to let them know that you're worried about what's going on next door and ask them to do a welfare check. It is way, way better to be embarrassed and feel like you overreacted than to risk having a dead or injured neighbour. Yeah. And I think that's, that is absolutely, we have to get over that. It's not my business. I shouldn't interfere. Maybe it's just an argument. We have to get over that. Yeah. If we're going to stop this happening during a pandemic, we need to act and we need to be unembarrassed about it. So, and that's the advice I would give around
that's
that.
a really strong message. I completely agree with you on that. Women's Community Shelter enables homeless women to rebuild self-esteem, achieve control and fulfilment in their lives. What are some of the ways that you work at achieving this?
Well, we have a network of 7 shelters in New South Wales, and we're working on establishing a couple more. And one of the points that I really want to make to people is that is that a safe shelter for women and kids is about so much more than just the roof over your head. It's actually that, plus it's also a really experienced professional woman and a community that will walk alongside you to help you with all the sorts of things that you might need. And that's things like helping you get referrals to doctors, to psychologists, to lawyers, immigration specialists if they need it. It's a friendly ear to talk to when you want to talk about what's gone on in your relationship. It's all of those connections also to employment, to education and training. It's helped to find sustainable housing for when you leave the shelter as well. So it's really a very tailored program to support each woman and her kids who comes through our shelters, and just helps them navigate all of the threads of a life that one that you've left and one that you need to create. And I think that is the most important part of what we do, is walking alongside a woman who's been through this and helping her out the other side. And that's a really important thing.
I love that. What are some of the types of donations that people can make to help?
Look, it's everything from a small donation. Something as simple as, well, if you're not commuting anymore and you can afford to donate your train fare, $25, something like that would give, would put a whole bunch of credit on somebody's phone so that they can continue to make the phone calls that they need to find their sustainable housing or help build their future. $50 would keep a woman and her kids safe overnight with everything that they need in a shelter. $750 would do that for a whole week. There's any number of contributions that can make, and people should not think that any donation is too small, because it can all make a difference. And look, at our local shelter level, some of the other things that we always need are non-perishable goods, like things like cleaning products, pantry items. Those kinds of things are always incredibly useful, and I would encourage people to get in touch with us at hello@womenscommunityshelters.org.au, and we keep a current list of things that the shelters need.
Great. And in terms of volunteering opportunities, how would anyone go about that?
Again, that same email address, hello@womenscommunityshelters.org.au. We have a range of volunteering opportunities. We're somewhat limited at the moment because of the pandemic, and we don't have as many people coming to the shelters, but that doesn't mean you can't act as an ambassador or a linchpin in each one of our communities to help raise awareness and support the shelters.
So on that, with women not coming to the shelters right now, what does that mean? Like, are they just stuck, or
it's a little bit unprecedented. We were always incredibly busy. Every time we set up a new shelter and open it, it's full within a week. So, it's what we've seen, I think, is really that it is hard to get away at the moment, and that people are very, very focused on their kids and on doing their work at home if they've actually got work, or they're trying to navigate all of the changes if they've lost work. And those really basic survival challenges are on people's minds right now. How do we adjust to that new world? And so I think, my strong hunch presently is that we may actually see a surge in demand for our services once the restrictions start to lift a little bit and people do get time on their own away from partners. Again, it's really quite an unprecedented time, and as I mentioned, we are getting a lot of those preparatory calls, which are really the step before needing that crisis bed. So it's pretty much a wait and see at the moment.
Are you able to share any of the questions that are in that I can't even say the word preparatory stage that anybody watching could possibly ask themselves and wonder if they are in?
It's things like we had some calls from a couple of quite young women, 17 or 18, who've moved back from uni to live with their parents because they can't work and they can't attend uni. And a few of them have said, look, things have always been bad between mum and dad, but it's really escalating and I'm scared. If I needed to get out and go somewhere, would you have beds available? Similarly, we might get calls from women who are saying things like, well, I'm still working. I'm working from home. My partner's trying to work from home as well, and he demands that I keep the kids quiet all the time. Things are really escalating, and I'm worried if I needed to get us out, would there be somewhere to go? So those are the kinds of questions I think people who may have been managing just okay beforehand, can find that these changed circumstances have really tipped the balance, and those are the ones I'm worried about.
Yeah. And in terms of COVID, what are the precautions like? Because then there's that extra added oh no, we can't catch it, and then be unable to help people. So what sort of, how is that affecting you, and what are you doing?
Well, we've actually put in place a whole bunch of very, very stringent responses to coronavirus and COVID-19. And so our shelters very much at the moment are in prevention mode, which is doing all of the things that we know you need to do to keep yourself safe. Lots of checklists, lots of cleaning, lots of reminders for hand washing, lots of sanitising and social distancing.
Yeah.
And we've also got a suite of responses prepared if anybody needs to self-isolate or to go into quarantine. So all of that's been work that we have done over the last month in preparation. And that's one of the key messages that I wanted to get out, to assure people that, our work is actually safe. Yeah. We have done a lot of preparation, and we will provide a safe place for you if you need it.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for your time. I'm so
My
happy
pleasure.
that I got to do this with you.